Before the video starts, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you. So we are about to jump in the car and start the drive over to Canterbury, where I'll be taking part in this year's Great British Escapades. Not only is it my first ever ultra race, it's also my first ever bike race. So let's get in the car and give this thing a go. So after a 4-hour drive up to Canterbury, found a nearby car park and started preparing my bike. Could already see some other riders nearby, said hello, introduced myself and met Bruce and Andrew. We traded stories as we prepped our bike, and once I got into my bike gear, I got ready to head over to the race start line, which is in a nearby place called Bexbourne. We then arrived at the village hall, registered ourselves before I met up with a few friends. You guys will remember Ryan from the recent night riding video I chucked up. Although the pre-race nerves are well and truly here at this point, the atmosphere was absolutely incredible. We had some serious riders who were planning on going super fast. There was a real mixture of people, but why was I even nervous? The course might explain why. This was the 7th ever Great British Escapades, which is based around the southeast of the UK. Due to its location, it's the perfect access point for the North Downs and allows you, once you've completed the North Downs, to turn back around and hit the South Downs. The more technical riding comes in the first 190-ish kilometers before you hit CP1, with the spicier climbs coming before CP2 along the South Downs. Final 140 kilometers is slightly flatter and a bit more forgiving and is more road-based, but it does chuck the odd curveball in there for you. In total, it's 484 kilometers of riding with just under 8,000 meters of elevation. This is why I was nervous. Back at the village hall, I prepared my bike with the tracker and race number and got ready for the induction. Kevin ran through the final race details before letting the first 20 riders know who they would be. One of them was me. He also let us know that we'd be setting off in 5 minutes, which is when I realised I should have spent less time chatting to other riders and more times prepping my bike. I did the final prep, checked my GPS and GoPro on the bike just in time for Kevin to shout, "Start." And we're off. The minute I began pedaling, my nerves disappeared as I was lost in the race. But as soon as the race had started, the heavens opened and we were in the middle of a downpour. The mix of adrenaline and energy from my first ever race meant I didn't want to pull over to put on my rain jacket. It felt like if I stopped, I'd be losing time. I was cruising along the road, chasing the race leaders, not even worried about getting wet. Even after the first few climbs, I couldn't be deterred. I was on a mission. I carried on pushing and found myself up front of the race with 2 other riders. With the rain still coming down and the adrenaline still pumping, the first hour of the race just completely shot by. That wasn't until halfway up a climb when I looked down and realised I had a puncture. This is where my nightmare began. To save you viewers 5 minutes of me talking in depth about my puncture problems, here's the 4 things you need to know. 1. I prepared incorrectly by bringing Schrader inner tubes. My bike only holds Presta, meaning I had no inner tubes that could replace my old one. Entirely my fault. Number 2. In my chaotic efforts to get the puncture repaired as quickly as possible, I'd lost the valve core of the punctured inner tube, meaning not only could I not replace my inner tube, I couldn't even repair the old one. I was essentially stranded 30 kilometers into the race. Number 3. Half the race had passed me by the time I realised points 1 and 2, but after 15 minutes, I managed to flag a man named Ryan down, who graciously gave me one of his spares, forever in this man's debt. And 4. Unfortunately, this wasn't the end. I got 2 more punctures on the same tyre over the next 10k. Anyway, back to the show. Following 60 kilometers, were less focused on me racing and more just trying to limp into the nearest town. I arrived in at 10:30 p.m. to Rochester and left my bike with some other racers that were at their 24-hour McDonald's, whilst I nipped over to Tesco in a last-ditch attempt to see if I could find some inner tubes. Of course, there were none. So there I was. My tyre had gone flat again at McDonald's. I had no inner tubes left and I had about 4 repair patches left. So after mulling over the decision, I decided that the only option was to stay in Rochester for the night at a hotel, get to the bike shop Halfords in the morning for the parts I needed. Absolutely deflated, I fixed the 4th puncture and then cycled over to the hotel. Halfords didn't open until 8 AM the next day, so it was a bit of a late start. I got ready in the room and had a quick coffee before cycling back the way I'd come. Yeah, Halfords was a 12-kilometer detour. I checked the leaderboard to find I was firmly in last place. Quickly realised the goal for this race for myself had now changed. It was just to finish. After picking up some breakfast and the inner tubes I needed, I set off again. I chucked some music in as I left Rochester and began climbing towards the North Downs. The route through here was very closed in, quite narrow, riding I wasn't very used to, but incredibly cool. I'd never really done riding like this before, so it was a big learning experience. But before I knew it, I was absolutely powering along the flats and just loving the descents. And as section 1 progressed, I finally managed to catch up with some other riders. The atmosphere was really good amongst the other racers, had some chats along the way, wishing each other good luck. It was really cool to see. I had one more puncture, taking my puncture count up to, I don't know why I'm holding up a 1 to 5, but I was powering towards checkpoint 1 up until we hit this sandy stretch, which definitely tested my patience. But I managed to get through unscathed and arrived into CP1 at 2:50 p.m. I decided to push on for another 30 kilometers to a place called Hazelmere, where I stopped for an early dinner. The next stretch along the South Downs would have limited resupply points for food and for water, so I topped up on both, made sure I was good to go through the night. Despite everything that had happened the night before, I found that this was my lowest point so far in the race. For some reason, I was absolutely knackered. My energy was really zapped, mindlessly chewing on my dinner, staring into the abyss of the night ahead. I left Hazelmere with a full stomach and found my energy levels had been restored. I had a brief problem on some of the climbs here with my leg cramping. My right quad kept seizing up, but I pushed on until I hit a little town called Grapham, which is the entry point to the South Downs. Before the race, some of the riders had warned me about this part. It seemed to be firmly in gravel riders' nightmares, and I could see why. The gradient ranges between about 15 to 20%, and the surface is just a complete mess left by loggers. So I hopped off and began walking. Once I got to the top though, I started powering along the South Downs and it was absolutely stunning. I was blown away by the beauty and some of the descents were just breathtaking. I mean, get a load of this. As the sun set in the distance, there was nothing that could get me off of cloud 9. Actually, scratch that, this can. To dealing with my 6th puncture, I continued ploughing on to a BP garage. It was past midnight now and the temperature had absolutely plummeted. So it was here that I sat around for about 30 minutes deciding what to do. In the end, grabbed the Red Bull, downed that, and got back on the bike. The witching hours weren't too kind to me though, and my average speed definitely took a hit. I found that at night I was constantly worried about whether I was going in the right direction, turned the backlight off my GPS to save battery, and was just never really sure, was always confused as to whether I was going the right way. I got 2 more punctures through this stretch, which really slowed me down as well. I was getting cold every time I had to stop for 10-15 minutes. Took a mental toll for sure. I did see plenty of riders through this stretch though, bivvied up at the side of the route, and for the first time in the race felt like I was catching up with the main group of riders, which was nice. As the bleak and coldest hours started to hit me, just an edge of sunlight creeped up along the horizon, gave me a glimmer of hope. So I pushed through the pain, made it into CP2 at around 4:30 a.m. I think. I cruised along another 20 kilometers or so into a place called Hailsham, where the shops are finally opening up at 6 a.m. and I managed to take stock and grab a coffee. Again, another blank stare into the abyss. As I stopped for coffee, I checked the leaderboard for the first time in a while and saw that I was now in 25th. It had been a while since I felt like I had a position to protect, and this gave me the motivation I needed to get back on the bike. This is the exact point though that the race starts playing tricks on you. Because you feel like the race is almost over, you forget you've got hours left in the saddle still. My mind started doing calculations, so I was telling myself I only had 4 hours left. Completely unrealistic. I chugged along though and linked up with a few other riders. It was nice to meet Johan and Andrew again, who I'd met earlier in the race. We rode together for a little while before I pushed on. At this point my bum hurt so much that I couldn't sit down on any off-road sections, so the spicy little off-road sections we would have, I would have to pedal out of the saddle, which was annoying. Surprisingly though, my legs didn't feel too tired. I had one final puncture along this last stretch, which I think takes this total count up to 9, and then then we entered the final 40 kilometers, which might be some of the longest Ks I've done in my life. Again, I don't think it's because the legs were really tired, or at least it seemed that way. It was more just wanting the mental battle to be over by this point. The final 10 kilometers in particular, they dived away from the nice road and gravel riding and took us on bridleways, and some of them were just bloody fields. I was just absolutely done at this point. I finished off the final 60-meter climb, made the last few turns into Beckersbourne before arriving back to the village hall and collapsing. Final turn is in the books. We're almost at the village hall. 480 kilometers comes to a close. 300 miles, plus the extra 12k I had to do for the spare parts. Whew, and it's done. Here we go. Pull it in. Kevin and Joe, the wonderful organisers, were there to receive me, as well as a few other riders. It took a minute to process the last few hours before Kevin let me know I'd come 22nd with a finish time 46 hours and 1 minute. He admitted it was quite a feat, as he thought I was going to scratch when he saw me at the McDonald's on the first night, which did feel like a very real possibility at that time. But I'd done it, completed the 484 kilometer race, my first ever ultra, and I was incredibly proud of myself. All in all, I had an absolutely incredible time for my first race, and I'm super thankful to the event organisers for making it feel as welcoming as it does. It's perfect for first-time riders. I would encourage anybody thinking about doing it or thinking about doing their first ever endurance race to make it this one, just for that reason. And if you do think of joining, I'll see you on the start line next year. In terms of the bike and equipment, there is a ton of things I'll be changing before my next race. You will be unsurprised to know that the tyres will be one of them. I think I would like to try out tubeless, but I would need to do it, I think, for my weight on a wider tyre, which would mean a different bike. Gearing as well would be something I'd change, especially on some of the spicier climbs across the South Downs. They were unrideable on the gravel gearing. Rehydration would be a big one I would change for the next race. Would definitely take a backpack. As an unexperienced off-road rider, I didn't realise how difficult it is sometimes to rehydrate just using water bottles. Practically impossible. To make sure you're rehydrating, I think it's necessary to have a Camelback. Fueling, I think, went well, although the one thing I would change would be savoury food on the bike. At times I was really done with sweet food, just like some wraps or sandwiches on the bike would be good. GPS, lighting, all my electronics, I would try and get as great a battery life as I could, just so that you're not worried about charging them through the night. And finally, saddle and maybe bib shorts. Towards the end of the race, the bum was in disrepair, and I would definitely look into seeing if there's a way to mitigate that. A comfier saddle, more support from the bib shorts maybe. If you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions about the race, let me know in the comments. I'll see you on the next one. So proud of myself. I mean, at the start of the race, thought I might scratch just because of all the problems I was having. Went from 99th, came back from last place. I think I'm in maybe 23rd at the moment. Just loving the North and South Downs. Some of the places where you get to really send it and go for it, they were super fun.